What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. Just wanted to remind you that this week we will be going back to the normal schedule. This means that for the 6 days of the week, you'll be getting videos with new true scary stories in them, as much as I can keep track of what's submitted to me at least. And on Sundays, there will be the weekly compilation video of all the stories I've read that week. If you guys end up enjoying this particular video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Doing all of these really helps the channel and the video to do well, and helps to ensure I can keep making these videos for a long time to come. If you guys have any thoughts about the stories in this video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as one of my favorite parts about doing this is reading your guys' comments. Even if I can't always respond to them because I'm busy recording and stuff. Without further ado though guys, I will let you enjoy the next hour or so of true scary stories, and I will see you again at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. This happened when I was 10 years old. I was at a ski resort with my dad, stepmom, and 3 sisters. When this happened, 2 of my sisters, my dad, and my stepmom were still out having fun and skiing. My sister Ava and I had gotten a bit too cold though, so we decided to go back to the hotel and grab some food and warm up. We sat at the restaurant inside the hotel until my stepmom came to check in on us. We asked her if she could hold the table for a moment so we could quickly go up to the room to drop off our ski jackets. We took the elevator, and once we got off, we started to approach our room. That's when I suddenly heard someone behind me call out to us, "Hey!" Now, keep in mind, we were both around 11 at this time. Obviously, I didn't assume this person was talking to us, so I just ignored it. We went into our room, but before we could manage to close the door, this man stepped into the doorway and blocked it. He was really tall, probably about 6 feet or so, and looked pretty old as well, maybe in his early 60s or late 50s. He was wearing the same type of hotel staff uniform, but it didn't have any of the logos or finer details on it. The thing that raised the biggest red flag, though, was that he was wearing black surgical gloves for some reason. The man started speaking to us again. "Hey, I was talking to you." We spun around, caught off guard. Ava was especially confused. "Us? Why?" He replied, "Yes, you. I was wondering if you could grab a pitcher for me, come into my room and pour some water." Our parents always told us never to trust strangers, and we were already getting an especially bad vibe from this man. We politely declined him. He became immediately irate and said it would just take a second. Couldn't we just come over and pour some water in his room? At this point, we clearly knew something was not right here, so we said no again. He kept blocking the door for another 3 minutes until we tried to walk into our room. Instinct kicked in at this point. I ran towards the door saying we were good and slammed it on him. I managed to force him out of the doorway. Ava and I sat in the hotel room for about 10 minutes, panicking about what we were going to do to talk to our parents. We had left our phones downstairs with my stepmom. We looked out the peephole, and the man appeared to be gone. We opened the door and bolted down the hallway, and ran back down the stairs to the restaurant. Once we told our stepmom, she was mortified, and went to office security immediately. They interviewed us and asked us for a description, because they didn't have any cameras in that hallway. We gave them a description of the man, and they told us that nobody with that description worked there. Most of the employees were young broke college students. At this point, it really set in that if the situation had gone on any longer, or if we did decide to follow and help him, we might really have died that night. This happened pretty recently, actually. I, a 23-year-old female, work in property management. I was not supposed to be working alone on this day, but my manager and coworker called in sick, and my other coworker had requested time off that we'd all forgotten about. I voiced my concerns because the property was in a crime-ridden area, and I'd had some bad experiences in the past. I actually transitioned to a different role because I no longer felt safe doing that job. They offered me a lot of money to come back though, so I did. The front door stayed unlocked during business hours, so literally anybody could walk in. It was a large and busy property. I really needed someone to accompany me just to help out with all the tours and showing the residents. Nobody was able to do anything though, so I called one of our sister properties and begged for them to send someone to help me. They agreed, but the leaser was going to have to leave early. I agreed and was just happy to have someone to help at all. Flash forward to an hour before closing. The person who had been sent to help me had to go. Literally just as she walked out the door, a disgruntled-looking man walked in, holding a duffel bag. I hate to profile someone immediately, but the man was clearly homeless and didn't appear to be all there mentally. He walked up to me and handed me his ID. I asked the man how I could help him, and all he would say was that I didn't respect veterans. I again asked him what he wanted me to do, but he wouldn't give me a straight answer. I was getting fed up with the man's antics when the coworker who had requested the day off just so happened to drop by to say hi. My coworker instantly realized something was off, so he came over to investigate. The homeless guy clearly didn't like my coworker asking him follow-up questions, so he opened up his duffel bag and started sorting through it. He pulled out a piece of woman's lingerie and slapped it onto my desk. He then pulled out a box which inside was a mysterious SD card. He began trying to force it into my computer, and I told him not to do that. He did stop, but proceeded to rummage through his bag. He seemed very irritated. We kept telling him that if he couldn't tell us what he needed, then how could we possibly help him? We then told him he was going to need to leave. At this point, I was starting to get scared. He was clearly becoming more and more agitated. I was worried he was going to pull a gun out of his bag and just light us up out of nowhere. Well, instead of a gun, he pulled out and brandished a knife. Both me and my coworker started to yell at him to put the knife away and leave. He still brandished the knife at us, refusing to leave the office. I messaged my manager who was out sick, but lived on site to call police. I told him there was a guy with a knife in the office. My coworker who was with me couldn't forcibly guide him out. He tried to gently guide his behavior by walking towards him and making himself look threatening. Eventually, the man began to back away, and once he backed out of the doorway, we immediately locked the doors. That really made him mad. He began to try and break back in and was cussing up a storm outside. Eventually, he moved away though and made his way to the convenience store that was attached to the building. Within 30 seconds of him going in, about 4 squad cars pulled up. We pointed at the store and they ran in after the man. The guy got aggressive and tried to tangle with the police, so they had to beat him and disarm him, and ended up detaining him as well. I told the police to look in his bag for any other weapons. They identified a few. We answered some of the police's questions. I decided not to press charges though. This was clearly a man in a mental health crisis, and jail wasn't going to do much to help with that. This man clearly needed some serious professional help. The DA pressed charges on my behalf, and the courts granted me a protection order. They also let him go without bail. The last update I got was that he didn't show up to his court hearing, so now there's a warrant out for his arrest. I've not seen him ever since that event took place, and that's all I really care about. I'm 22, and this incident happened about a year and a half ago. I had just moved into my first apartment, and I was in the process of moving in still. The door that led into my apartment locks itself automatically whenever closed, so I was going to the entrance of the apartment complex to get my mail, while on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat down on the bed while opening up my mail. While using the phone, I just so happened to drop it onto the floor, and it landed underneath the bed. I had to crawl down and lie on the floor, then stretch out to grab for it. That's when I saw something that really caught my eye. There appeared to be someone underneath my bed. My eyes immediately widened, and I choked back the urge to scream. The person lying under my bed was resting with his back toward me and his head tucked into his chest. Because of that, I couldn't see his face. He didn't see me yet, it seemed. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head. I picked up my phone and then said sorry. I said I'd dropped my phone and I was going to take a shower quickly, then call right back. The bathroom was right by my bed, so I hastily walked in and locked the door as quietly as possible. I turned on the shower and then jumped out of my window and called the police. For reference, my apartment is on the first floor. They told me to wait nearby, but to go across the street and see if anyone came out of the door to the apartment complex. This was during summer, so it was actually still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend, and he arrived just before the police did. I gave them my keys, and they went inside. Only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a thin and tired-looking man. His eyes looked crazed, but he didn't try to get away at all. The policeman that stood beside me and comforted me while the police searched through my house told me that the man was standing outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives, waiting for me to emerge from the shower. This man had somehow crept in my entry door while I was retrieving my mail. He then hid underneath my bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person, and he was eventually placed into a mental hospital. My boyfriend luckily moved in with me the very next day. I just wanted to share my story so that others may know what to do if they're ever in a situation like this. The police told me that what I did was truly amazing, and that if I had simply screamed, things could have ended really badly for me. In the summer of 2022, I had applied to work on a cruise ship sailing around the islands of Hawaii. To start with, I wouldn't recommend this job to anyone. We worked ridiculous hours and had absolutely 0 days off. This story starts, however, before I even boarded the cruise ship to work on it. In America, one must complete a special training course to work on this job. It's basically a week-long course that teaches you basic firefighting, paramedic skills, and seaworthy skills. After passing my medical, I headed off to complete my special training. I flew in for the training stupid early. I think it was about 5 a.m. or so when I arrived. I waited for the rest of my group to get to the airport. Once we were all there, we took a bus to the training camp. You could imagine the tension. Here we are, completely new to each other, embarking on the adventure of a lifetime. All was well except for this one guy. He's the center of the story, really. We arrived at the camp and set our bags in our rooms. I was lucky enough to not have a roommate. Once our initial meeting started, this man, who we'll call S, decided to start causing problems from the get-go. He was about 60 years old with grimy hair and old tattered clothes. I'm not one to judge. However, when someone is interrupting an explanation of a unique job that I definitely need to listen to, that can be very, very annoying. Throughout the meeting, to define what we'd need to learn, this man continued to interject with useless anecdotes and questions that would obviously be answered just a short time later. It sounds like a relatively minor complaint, like I'm being really hard on the guy, but the average age of people at this meeting was maybe 25. I myself was 22 at the time. We all thought that this guy was really slowing the progress down. Anyway, as class progressed, this 60-year-old guy took a liking to one of the 20-year-olds. I guess in some ways that's sort of natural, but he'd always run ahead to open doors for her and wait for her to exit class so he could follow her. I guess it was a bit sweet, but there still seemed to be something wrong with this guy. When we went to the firefighter training, he slowed us all down incredibly. We had to train to get our gear on in 60 seconds, and the guy failed over and over. After that day, things started to go really downhill. Because S had failed multiple different sections of the training, he was obviously no longer able to join the cruise ship crew and would be sent home shortly. His flight, however, didn't leave until the same day we flew to Hawaii. He still took it upon himself to sit down with us at lunch and always interject in our conversations. He was asking what the rest of the courses were about one day at lunch, when I happened to make the mistake of saying that I liked people born in May. I can't remember why exactly I said that. Well, it turns out this guy just so happened to be born in May as well, and he took that as a signal that I should be his new target. His roommate told me that he would spend his whole night standing up and staring at the wall for hours on end in the direction of my room, or making weird faces in the bathroom mirror. After that, he made sure to always follow me and kept mentioning how badly he wanted a family with me. Keep in mind, I was 22, and this guy was 60. He was older than my dad. The worst thing by far that happened, though, was the very last day that I was there. I came out of class to use the bathroom, and S was standing inside the girls' bathroom when I entered. He actually cornered me and shoved me up against the wall. He told me that he couldn't stop thinking of me and that he wanted to impregnate me so badly. He told his roommate that I was in love with him just because of the birth month. Luckily, I managed to escape from him and reported this lunatic. I later found out that he had lied on his work form, saying he had never committed a felony. In actuality, he'd been arrested before for beating and stalking his ex-wife. He was actually homeless, and she had a restraining order against him. They hadn't figured it out by the time they'd let him go as far as the training camp for the cruise ship. Had this freak passed his firefighting test, he may have been working closely with the people on that vacation cruise. And that thought makes me sick. How could someone get that far into the process without being stopped? Really makes me think twice about the people I encounter on board those ships. Thank goodness I'm not working there anymore. But for the love of Pete, do better, cruise companies. Look further into the people you're employing. Who wants to be stuck on a cruise ship for months on end with a guy who's a convicted felon? You gotta keep the vacationers safe. That's the least you can do. I'm a woman, and I'm originally from Denmark. I moved to America in 2009. I've studied English since I was in 3rd grade because I've always wanted to visit America. When I was a kid, I just wanted to go there and have lots of fun. but as I got older, my reasons for going there changed. I love my home country for sure, but the truth is that there were limited opportunities there. When I was 19, I decided I needed to get out of there. I wanted a better life for myself, and I was tired of being broke and cold. I was eventually accepted into a college in San Francisco, but finding a place to stay was very difficult. Everywhere I looked was out of my price range. By chance, a friend of mine put me in contact with a family member of his who happened to live in Oakland, which is the city directly east of San Francisco. I'll call this man George. George was also from Denmark like me, but he moved away and started a family in California. Since our stories were so similar, he agreed to take me in until I found another arrangement. My room was on the ground level and overlooked the backyard. At first, things were pretty great. I know that Oakland has a reputation for being a rough place, but the area that we were in was very nice. I wasn't really much into American football before I came here, but George was a die-hard Raiders fan and explained to me that in order to assimilate into American culture, I had to pick a football team to root for. He even said that if I rooted for any other team aside from the Raiders, he would kick me out and I'd have to find another place to stay. George's wife wanted to take a trip down to Houston to visit her parents. George agreed under the condition that they would go see the Raiders play against the Texans while they were down there. That meant they would be gone for about a week. This was around early October. 2 days after they had left, I was all alone. I was up late studying for some upcoming exams. There was a nice breeze out that night, so I kept the window open. I must have dozed off at my desk at some point, which has happened to me many times before. When I woke up, I was still sitting in my computer chair. I was about to get up when I heard a sound that sent chills running down my back. Someone was breathing right behind me. I quickly stood up, but before I could even scream or make a sound, a hand covered my mouth, followed by a blade pressing against my neck. "You make a sound and I'll bleed you dry," a shaky voice said. Words cannot describe how scared I was in that moment. There was a mirror in front of the desk, and in it I could see my own terrified face. I could also see the reflection of the person behind me, who had a black mask on with a hood over their head. "We're going to move over to the window. Blink once if you understand me." I blinked. "Good. If you cooperate with me, then you won't get hurt." Next to the window, there was a lamp that sat on top of a nightstand, which had a thick glass base. The switch was broken, and the only way to turn it on and off was to either plug it in or unplug it. At the moment, it was off. That will be important to remember. As we moved next to the window, the voice spoke again. "I have a gun too, so don't try anything." As soon as he said that, he lowered the blade from my neck. I didn't know if he really did have a gun, or if he was just bluffing. Regardless, I knew that he would need at least a few moments to pull it out and ready it. I wasn't going to give him that chance. I grabbed the heavy lamp off the nightstand and smashed it over his head. I then jumped out the window and raced toward the nearest neighbor's house. I heard an angry shout from behind me, but I didn't look back. I woke up the neighbor by pounding on his front door like a crazy person. Soon the police were called, and they showed up about 10 minutes later. They searched George's house from top to bottom, but there were no signs of the intruder. Thankfully, nothing seemed to be missing. That kind of struck a nerve with me though, because that meant he specifically came in to grab me and was not interested in anything else. I'm afraid I'm going to have to end this story with the same old "they never found the guy." There is a bit of hope though, because they did find a big red blood stain by the window, along with pieces of the broken lamp which were taken as evidence. If he ever commits another crime, they have his DNA on file. Since it's been over a decade though, I think I must have knocked some sense into him that day. I get the feeling he was nervous about what he was doing, and me smashing the lamp over his head was a real wake-up call for him. By the way, if you're wondering, the Raiders got absolutely demolished in Texas 29-6. I'm a woman, and this happened when I was 20. In the early 2000s, people used landlines, and cell phones were not unlimited, obviously. This happened in a town about an hour away from Sacramento. My friend was house sitting for a family that her family was friends with from church. She was to house sit out in the country just outside of town for a week. They had animals like cats, rabbits, a donkey, and even a horse. Of course, the family had dogs too, but they'd taken the dogs with them. My friend was in charge of feeding the animals and watching over the place. She didn't have to get the daily mail because they had this metal lockbox-style mailbox down their long driveway. They didn't have any neighbors for miles, just fields of alfalfa, cattle, and corn. I guess the lockbox was for safety or something. Well, towards the end of the week, she asked if I wanted to spend the night and keep her some company. I thought it sounded quite fun. I had moved out of my aunt and uncle's and gotten my own apartment, so I told her I'd pick her up on the way there. After I got out of work, I picked her up and we got there at around 9:30 p.m., grabbing some dinner along the way. We went into the barn first thing and fed the animals. It was a bit late for their dinner, and they made their hunger known with their animal noises. We made sure they had more than enough water and then went inside. The house was this big ranch-style house, single story. The living room was to the left, and as you walked into the home, there was a long hallway directly to the right of the entrance that led to where the bathroom and bedrooms were. Straight ahead was a dining area, and to the left of that was the kitchen area and a patio door. They did not have an open floor plan in the kitchen. On the opposite side from the dining area, there was another long hall with several doors. My friend explained that the wife ran a daycare center out of the home, and these rooms were apparently play areas for all the kids. We didn't bother going over to that section because we had no interest in tampering with the kids' stuff. We watched some TV, ate our leftovers, and talked about people we knew. As it got later, she turned on the house alarm and said she didn't like sleeping in other people's beds, so she'd just been sleeping on the couch. She then offered the couch to me and said she would sleep on one of the two huge recliners. It reclined so far back that it was almost flat. Those chairs were really comfortable. I said I'd just take the chair, so I went and laid back in one with my blanket. We turned off the TV and talked for another 20 minutes in the dark, when all of a sudden, the motion sensor floodlights started shining in through the window, lighting up the whole room. Now, I have no idea why people out in the country think it's okay to not have curtains or blinds, because to me that's kind of insane. We both got real quiet, and Amanda said that maybe it was just one of the cats. We started hearing a crunching sound though, like a person walking across gravel. My chair was the closest to the window, so I carefully slid down to the floor, clutching my stupid blanket the whole time. The floodlight timed out, and my friend slid to the floor as well. We laid on our stomachs in the dark, not knowing what to do. We waited for a minute, when we heard a loud bang, and all of a sudden the house alarm started blaring. The floodlights turned on again. It was so loud that we covered our ears and began to panic. I swear, I've never been so close to pissing my pants in my life. I began crawling toward the keypad for the security because I'd seen the commercials. There's a button you push and a person responds in case of an emergency. I could see on the main screen it said patio 1 of 2 open. Amanda started to cry and hit the call assistance button on the pad. Nothing happened. There was no assistance. I asked her where the phone was, and she said there was a phone in the kitchen and one in the parents' room down the hall. Our choices were to go to the kitchen past the windows and next to one of the patio doors, or to go down the hall to the parents' room and use that phone. I asked where the other patio door was, and she said it was in the daycare portion of the home. It was an easy decision. We went to the parents' room. It was pitch black inside, and I asked her where the phone was. She said we might have to turn on the light. I really didn't want to, but had no choice. I didn't have a flashlight, and I didn't bring my cell phone because I had limited minutes. It was a simpler time. Amanda didn't even get her own cell until after this happened. She turned on the light, and we started looking around the room. Not only did these people not have any curtains on any windows, but they didn't even have closet doors. We noticed a golf club leaning against the wall by the bed. Probably had that instead of a baseball bat. We figured that if we grabbed that and hit someone with it, it was really going to leave a mark. Amanda grabbed it, and we continued our search for the phone. We looked at all the obvious places and eventually found the cordless phone stand, but the actual phone was gone. The alarm was still blaring. We had a light on now, and the person who opened the patio door was bound to notice. That was all I could think about. At that point, she asked if we should use the locate phone button. I looked at her and responded, "Yeah, if you want some weird guy coming in here with it and asking you if you were looking for something." I was getting mad that I was so scared and in a helpless situation. I stood there knowing we'd have to go to the kitchen in the house. The alarm stopped and it got country quiet. If you lived out in the country, you know exactly what I was talking about. There was no other golf club for me to grab, so she had to go out first, flipping every light on and keeping the doors that we passed in the halls closed. We double-checked the security panel, and it still said the patio was open. We hit the call button once again, and it still did not work. Double-checking the front door was still locked, we started for the kitchen. I told her we'd have to check the patio near the kitchen first. I grabbed a big knife that wasn't even close to being sharp. We checked the patio door in the kitchen area. It was locked and appeared to be fine. We turned all the lights, grabbed the phone, and dialed 911. The phone wasn't cordless, by the way. It was one of those ancient ones with a cord attached to a wall. My friend was on the phone with the dispatcher, telling her what was going on, when I heard a whistle start coming from outside the kitchen window. The thing people tend to not think about, because I know I didn't, is that while turning on the lights allows you to see inside, you have a reflection on the inside of the window. You can't see out, but the people on the outside have a very clear view of you. I heard the whistle again. It sounded like someone trying to get someone else's attention, that sort of whistle, but I couldn't see anything outside. I wasn't going to press my face directly to the window to try and get a better view. My friend was still talking to the dispatcher and was crying and saying she didn't know the exact address to the house. She handed me the phone. I said hello to the dispatcher lady, who sounded very annoyed. She told me she needed the address to send the police to. I asked that she just trace the call, and she said something like, "You're house sitting and you don't even know where you're at?" Scared, angry, and overwhelmed now, I handed the phone back to Amanda and started looking for something with an address in the kitchen. I also kept an eye down the hall that had the daycare rooms, knowing that on the other side of one of those doors was a patio door that was currently open. At that point, Amanda removed the phone from her ear and stared at me with a blank face. I asked her if they were tracing the call because I couldn't find anything with an address. Amanda just said the dispatcher said she hoped the police would find us in time and hung up the phone. I was now really scared and angry. At the same time, we knew that there were people outside. We knew the patio door to the daycare area was open. We did not know what to do, though. We stood in the kitchen silently for what seemed like forever, but was probably only a minute or so. We heard a loud metallic bang outside the kitchen window by the patio door. It sounded like someone had dropped something metal and heavy. At that point, we called 411 and told them everything. They said they were connecting us directly to the police, and they would stay on the line with us. A police officer answered the phone, and the 411 operator started explaining what was happening. They were asked to disconnect once we had established a connection ourselves. The police asked a few questions, and we heard the whistle again outside. The floodlights all around the house turned on again. I was too scared to look outside. We had never turned on the patio light because we had to walk past the patio window to get to the switch. We told the policeman on the phone about the whistling, and he said several officers would be showing up shortly and to stay on the phone. We were just outside the town limits, and I knew it might take a while. Having an officer on the phone made me feel a little bit better, but it was still really scary. At some point, he told us the police had arrived, and they were coming up the driveway. The policeman said to put down the phone and open the door, so I did. What I saw outside was a police pickup truck with spotlights flashing into the pastures that ran along both sides of the drive. 2 officers with shotguns were walking slowly beside the truck as it came up the long drive. 4 officers approached the home and asked us our names. One went to the phone and said they were here and hung up. They ordered us to stay in the dining room and began searching the house and property. One by one, they returned. The last one came back in through the patio door by the kitchen. He said he'd searched the barn and the horses were really spooked. He asked what other animals were in there. They told us that they didn't find anyone and that the daycare patio was not locked. They lectured Amanda about not knowing the address of the home she was supposed to be responsible for, and some other stuff. I don't really remember. After finishing statements, they said they'd stick around and look more, and if we wanted to leave, we could. They could lock the bottom lock but not activate the alarm. We were cool with that, and we left there so fast. We got into my car and went to her mom's, so mentally exhausted that we fell asleep right away. I went to my office job the next morning. My friend said she really didn't want to go back to the house, but she had to feed the animals. Her mom told her to take her sister, and she did. That afternoon, she called me at work. She was really nervous. She began to tell me that when they went into the house, there were footprints and feces on the carpet. I said it was probably the cop that checked the barn, and she said she didn't know if it was them or not. She also said that when they went into the barn to feed and water the animals in the morning, someone had tied all the rabbits' legs together in their hutches. She continued to say that there was a note with the word "lucky" inscribed on the back of a pizza coupon that she thought had come from the refrigerator door. The flyer on there was missing a coupon. It took them a while to untie all the rabbits. Amanda asked her mom to find someone else from their church to finish the house sitting. She certainly didn't want to go back. She also told the officers as well when they came back to look, but no one was ever caught, and the police never called either of us to update us. This is the most terrifying experience I've ever had, and really traumatized me. When I was single, one of my friends was really adamant on setting me up on all these dates. She was so overly content with her own boyfriend that she'd had it in her mind that I really needed one too. She said that her boyfriend's one friend was a good-looking single guy who didn't have many friends or acquaintances. He'd just moved to the area, and she wanted to introduce him to me. He was a medical student for the next prefecture over. It took a little convincing, but I decided to take the plunge and meet up with this guy. Only on the condition, though, that it would be all 4 of us together, and I wouldn't have to meet up with him alone. We met up for the first time only very briefly. I'm talking like 30 minutes tops. I think my friend organized it that way because she knew how nervous I was about the whole thing. The whole rush double date actually went pretty well, though. I have to say, it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be. I exchanged numbers with the guy. We texted for a while and then arranged a second date. He was to take me on a night drive and then grab some dinner together. That struck me as a little bit of an unusual date, but we were both students, so it kinda made sense. We weren't exactly made of money for fancy outings. He arrived in a really nice car, so my theory about keeping the date cheap immediately went out the window. He said his parents had bought it for him. They wanted him to have that right kind of look. That's certainly something, I thought to myself. I looked over to the car to check out the interior. I looked at the back seats and noticed something strange. There was a bundle of rope just sitting there in the back seat. We pulled away, and as we were driving, I thought to myself, I wonder what the reason for that rope is back there. Another part of my mind said to me there must be a good reason. Maybe he needed it for some medical student thing. Although he did know we were going on a date tonight, so why would he leave random clutter back there? I started to get a little bit nervous. The conversation in the car had kind of died out at this point. It was becoming awkward. Silences weren't very pleasant for me. I pulled down the little flap thing that has the mirror on it, and when I pulled it down and looked into the mirror, I felt as if I was sweating. I didn't want to show this guy that I was getting a little weirded out. I mean, at that point, it was just some rope in a car. I tried to think of other things, but I could not hide my discomfort with this awkward silence. We were supposed to go to this observatory area in the mountains to look at the stars together. It sounded like a great time, but all I could really see was miles and miles of forest separated by the open road. We were going somewhere very discreet. I wanted to give this guy the benefit of the doubt, though. After a short while, we arrived at the observation deck. We were now in the darkness of nature all alone. It seemed like all the insects in the world were out chirping this night. I guess that was much better than the awkward silence in the car. I was looking up at the stars when my date said the following. So, which would you prefer? I leave you out here alone and drive away, or you have sex with me? Naturally, I was shocked and stunned. I looked into his eyes because I was thinking maybe it was just a really poor joke or something. His demeanor immediately told me he was not kidding. He stood there arrogantly waiting for an answer. I did my best to try and play along. I needed a ride out of there after all. I made promises I knew I wouldn't bring myself to deliver. I don't really want to talk about that bit, to be honest. All I can tell you is that he was clearly happy he'd forced me to answer positively. Felt like a power thing. Once we got to the restaurant parking lot, I made some excuse to go over to the convenience store. Then I pretended like I was sick. I then did my best to do some things that I knew would put him off. Thankfully, I made it home and called my friend and told her everything. I also told her boyfriend to tell that guy to never bother me again. Luckily, later in life, I ended up meeting with a great guy and marrying him, but I can't help but feel I had a very close call on that night all those years ago. This happened when I was in college. I lived with 4 other guys in a dormitory, and not one of us had a girlfriend. We were pretty cool dudes. We didn't have much to do back in those days, though, and we weren't ones for the club scene or anything like that. We got into this rhythm of heading out on night drives instead. I mean, we really didn't have to be up early for class, and we had so much extra time on our hands. Just kinda happened to work out that way. I remember it was a hot and humid night. We were in the throes of summer, and we had no real direction in mind. My friend was driving us in his car. It was a used car, but that was to be expected, as we were all students. His aircon did not work very well, so I always rolled the window down. We had been driving for a while with no particular destination in mind. It was nice to just chill out. I noticed that we were someplace we hadn't been before. We were in the mountains, and the houses were becoming few and far between. My friend who was driving thought it wouldn't be an issue to turn up the car's stereo at this point. It was really fun, actually. We were coming up on a part of the mountain pass that was at the highest point of this particular mountain road. We were about to pull forward after checking for oncoming traffic when the stereo suddenly caught off. It seemed strange for it to just shut off like that. It was a second-hand car, but the stereo itself was pretty new. When we passed over the highest point, the stereo came back to life, and we soon stopped caring about that strange glitch. We kept on driving. I think that shortly after that incident, we got bored of the drive and decided we were going to head home. I was looking forward to playing some online games when we got back. We were really blasting our tunes at this point. We turned around and headed back the way we came. We got to that same part, and once again the stereo suddenly cut out. This had us all interested, so we decided to pull over and figure out if there was anything there that could be causing our tunes to stop at this one particular point on the road. I mean, I don't know what we were really looking for. We just kinda used it as an excuse to stop the car and look around. I mean, all four of us were guys, and it didn't creep us out to be in the middle of nowhere at that time of night. There was one thing I noticed as soon as I got out of the car, and that was the fact that there was no sound. By that, I mean there was no chirping of insects, no rustling of leaves in the wind, no distant sounds either. It was like a world of nothing but silence. A world without sound was so eerie. All four of us were silent too. The moon was out, and it wasn't all that dark because we had the car's headlights as a light source as well. Both sides of the road were overgrown with grass and weeds. It didn't look like there was anything in the vicinity that could be outing the stereo. I don't even know what we were looking for, though. A giant magnet of some kind? A radio transmitter? I'm not really sure. Suddenly, the friend who was the driver that night said, "Hey, did one of you speak just now?" He looked at us with a look of fear written all over his face. None of us had said anything. We all knew no one was trying to pull a prank either. The atmosphere was very somber at that point. "Guys, don't try to freak me out, okay?" We assured him that no one had said anything. Now, here is where things get very, very weird. I suddenly heard a voice as well. I knew right away the voice did not belong to any of my friends. It was strange. It was like I was hearing it inside my own head. The mysterious voice was whispering some unintelligible words in a raspy voice. We must have all heard it at once, because the second I heard it, I saw everyone else shudder as well, all as if in unison. It was so creepy. I didn't need to be told twice. We jumped into the car and pulled away. No one said a single word. It was just understood that we needed to get the hell out of there. I didn't get a chance to play video games that night. We all huddled together after that night drive and tried to calm down. The voice in my head sounded so creepy. It was all just so strange. It was horrible. Since that night, my friends vowed not to go anywhere near that anomaly of a road again. It was a great spooky anecdote to tell at parties, but deep down we were all still so creeped out by it. I'm not sure if anybody else also feels like this, but over time my fear gradually turned into curiosity. I wondered what would happen if I went back there. I mean, we'd only experienced it in one car. Maybe it could have been some circuitry issues or something. Maybe we were all tired and overreacting to a shared auditory hallucination, some sort of mass hysteria thing. What would happen if I went back there alone? I decided to go back before graduation. I figured I'd never get another chance if I didn't do this. It was February when I went back, the end of February, so it wasn't super cold. I left for the mountain pass in my car, during the day, mind you, as I was too scared to go back at night alone. I approached that pass without my stereo playing. I pulled over because I spotted something strange by the side of the road. There was a faded wooden sign jutting just out of the grass beside the road. I kneeled down to take a closer look. The sign must have been hidden that summer due to the growth of weeds and grass. There were some faded letters painted in blue. I'll tell you what the sign said. It was only partially legible, so when I say the letter X, that's all the stuff I couldn't read. Here's what the sign said. Here lies XXXXX. Please, it's sleeping. Next to the sign was a large stone, which had been decorated with strange symbols. It looked almost as if it was there to enshrine something, like a memorial to an event or something, not the grave of a person being buried there. There was no name mentioned on the sign either. As I looked a bit closer, I started to make out more of the second word, so I read the sign again. Here lies XXX. Quiet, please. It's sleeping. I didn't know what was going on here, but it was very strange. I bowed my head and clasped my hands together in a prayer, and I apologized to whatever force me and my friends might have annoyed that night. I wondered if it was all in my imagination. I also wondered if there might have been a cursed object or something buried there. Either way, though, I was happy to heed that warning and never go there again. About 2 years ago, I rented a room in a 3-bedroom house. The walls were very thin, and my bedroom had this window. The window will be important later on. There were 3 bedrooms, one for me, one for the master tenant, and one spare, which at the time was rented out by a pretty friendly guy. Well, friendly guy had some issues with his work visa and had to move back to Canada last minute. That left us about 2 weeks to find another roommate. Our quickest and easiest option was Craigslist. Due to my work schedule, I had no part in the selection process. I was content when the new roommate moved in a bit later. Something seemed off about this guy, but he was very friendly. He was a large, tall man and was very quiet. Not someone I wanted to go out of my way to hang out with, but also okay to be around. 2 weeks after he moved in, the master tenant left for Hawaii, leaving me and this new guy alone. For the first few days, everything was perfectly normal. However, that all suddenly changed one night. I was woken up at about 8 a.m. to a very frantic knocking on my door. The new roommate, we'll call Kyle, was standing there when I opened it up. He was looking frazzled and looked me dead in the eyes. "So do you want to tell me what was going on last night?" I was shocked and confused as to what he was talking about. Last night, I had come home from work at about 9 p.m. and immediately showered and went to bed. I explained this to him, and he said he'd heard me screaming, that he saw me through the window arguing with our landlord, who I'd never even met in person at this point. He claimed that he heard people coming in and out of our house. I told him no way. None of that ever happened. After staring at me for a bit longer, he finally left. The next morning, I woke up to the same thing. He said he'd seen me arguing with my boyfriend. Thing is, I was single at the time. He said he saw me talking with the master tenant as well, who, as I mentioned before, was away in Hawaii. He also asked me for the badge number of the officer I was talking to. Apparently, he saw a bunch of police as well this time. I got angry and more or less told him to cut this shit out. I was not doing anything, and I had no idea what he was talking about. He got this weird look on his face and said he thought he had a seizure in his sleep, that next time that happened, to call the ambulance. After that, he left. About an hour later, he began knocking at my door again. When I opened up, Kyle repeated the exact same story verbatim. I told him to leave me alone, and then I left for work. My workday went about as well as I'd expected it to. I was a bit reluctant to return home, but I was too tired to crash at somebody else's place. Big mistake. At about 1 a.m., I woke up to doors slamming. Kyle was pacing back and forth between his bedroom and the living room, then to the front door, walking in and out of each room and turning the lights on and off. He was mumbling angrily to himself. I could see his shadow pacing back and forth through the frosted window in my room. Since my room was dark, he couldn't see inside. Suddenly, he began to scream, "I can't live like this anymore! Why are you doing this to me?" I thought he was on the phone, so I didn't respond. A few moments later, though, he screamed my name. I then realized his statements were directed at me. I knew I had to get out of there, so I quietly crept out of bed and started getting dressed, packing up bags of clothes for work in the morning. I was almost done when he screamed again, "I can hear you!" He charged over to my room, smacking the wall next to my door, but not touching the door itself. I looked over to my window and saw his shadow leaning all the way forward, pressing his ear up against the glass. I was terrified. I sat completely still, not daring to move a muscle. He screamed my name again and moved away from the window. I heard him start pacing between rooms again. My shoes are kept on a rack outside my door and not inside my room. I knew that when I left, I was going to need a moment to put them on. I decided to wait until he was back in his room, at which time I planned to grab my shoes, put them on, and then run. I was formulating the plan when his pacing suddenly stopped. He then screamed again. "Do you want to fight about this? Come out right now and we'll fight. I swear to God." Now, I'm a very small girl and only 5 feet tall. This guy was easily 3 times my size. I was certainly not looking for a fight. After a few minutes, he turned off all the lights, and I heard the door to his room open and close, followed by silence. I waited for a moment to be sure I couldn't hear any movement, and then I took my chance. I took a deep breath, opened my door, and stepped out. I grabbed my shoes. I looked up a second later to see him standing there in the dark hallway with nothing but a pair of boxers and socks on. He spoke in a low and calm voice. "Ma'am, we need to talk." That was a hard no from me. I grabbed my shoes and ran out the front door with them in hand. I made it about a half a block barefoot before stopping and putting them on. When I looked behind me, I saw him standing in the light of the porch by our front door, watching me run but not moving. Luckily for me, I had a friend who lived about 2 blocks away, and I had their spare key on me. I let myself in and crashed there for the night. That's where I stayed for the next week, while we worked things out with our landlord. Kyle agreed to move out within the week, and said he didn't remember anything that happened. He wasn't sure if it was real or not, but said that if I said that's what went down, then it must be true. The day Kyle left, he sent me a photo of the house keys sitting on the table, along with a message that said, "I'm out." I took a friend over there with me to scout it out and make sure he actually left. When we got there, we discovered that not only did he leave a bunch of food and furniture behind, but he'd also ripped all the fire alarms from the ceiling and unscrewed and removed the deadbolt from the front door. He left it all lined up neatly on the front table. The door to my bedroom can only be locked by using a key from the outside, and had been locked when we arrived. That meant that Kyle still had the key to my room. We called the locksmith right away. Even after the locks were changed, though, I was still terrified to stay there alone, and never went to sleep at night without barricading the doors with chairs and other furniture. To this day, I still fear for his safety. He obviously had some kind of psychological condition. I wonder what could have happened to me if I hadn't been as lucky as I was. When I was a little girl, I remember I was playing on the beach by myself. This was pretty normal, as my family owned a condo that sat directly on the beach front. I got somewhat bored and decided it was about time to head home. I started walking back toward my place. I was passing my street's beach entrance, which is a pathway in between the sand dunes protecting the beach. That was when I noticed an older man just kinda standing there. I immediately got a creepy vibe, but decided to walk by him anyway. As I was passing by, all of a sudden he grabbed me and whispered in my ear, "I'm going to fuck you." I bit him and ran all the way back home as quickly as I could when he released me. I told my mom what happened right away. I asked her what fuck meant. It wasn't exactly a pleasant experience. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.